this video, we will understand what stale data mean and how to avoid them. Back to the rectangle. When we designed this class, we kept things simple. We only used the length and width as the attributes. Now let's make it more interesting and add the area. The area is equal to the length times the width. Now, since the area value depends on other attributes, and depending on how you define the area within your class, there is a possibility that the data in the area becomes stale. The reason we say depending on how you define the area in the class is because some parts of the class are executed only one time. If this is where you define your area, it will take a single value at the time of calculation and never update again, and it becomes stale. We don't want that, and we want to learn how to avoid it. So let's take an example. Here is our old rectangle class. It has the two fields, length and width, and the four methods, two getters and two setters. Now let's edit the UML to add the area. Intuitively, I will add the area as a field or an attribute that is private and of type double. Since it's private, I will define a public getArea method that will return the area field when called. So how does that change our class? I added the field and the method, very similar to the length and width and their getters. So for example, here I have the private double area, which is equal to the width times the length, and the getArea method, which returns the area field. So what's the problem? The problem is that when you create a rectangle object, like in this code, Java will create the object which has the three fields and all the methods. The length and the width are initialized to 0. Since the area is equal to length times the area, it will be equal to 0 as well. Notice that all of this is done when you created a new rectangle object automatically for the first time. Then you go to set the width to be 20 and the length to 10, which setWidth and setLength methods will do for you. And this is where the problem occurs. After updating the length and width, the class will not update the area with the new width and length values. This is what we mean when we say that the data of the area field becomes stale. So how can we fix this? And instead of calculating the area in the field, which will make it stale, you want to keep the calculation dynamic. In other words, you want that every time the getArea is called, it should calculate the area using the latest length and width. One way to do that is to move the calculation to the getArea method. This way you make sure that the data is never stale. And now you can remove the area field since you are not using it. So here is a question. What if we want to keep an area field? How can we make sure our area data will not be stale? We will discuss this in the following coding demo. In this demo, we will discuss stale data and how to avoid them. This is the old rectangle class. We have the two fields, length and width, and we have the four methods that operate on these two fields, two setters and two getters: set length, set width, get length, get width. Notice also that we, in general, whenever we program, we try to group the setters and getters together. All right, so what we want to do is to add the area calculation. So one way is to do private double area and say this is equal to length times width. Then if you want to get the area, you define a method to get the area for you. So get area, and all it does that it returns the area field for you. Now if we run this and we go to the rectangle demo here and we try to do get area first here, and then after updating the length and width, I'm going to try to get the area again. All right, which should reflect the update on the length and width because the area depends on them. So if I run, here's what happens. First, the length was 0 when I initiated that or instantiated that object box, and the length is 0, width is 0, and the area is 0, which makes sense. But then I go update the length and width to take new values, but the area remains 0. And this is what we mean by stale data. when you created the object for the first time, length got the value 0, width got the value 0, 0 times 0 set to area, which is 0, and then that's it. You have the object initialized to zeros. Now, when you go set the length, set the width, it just updates one field at a time, all right? But it never goes and updates the area. It's not the responsibility of the class to do this. So how can we fix this problem? To fix this problem, what we can do is that we can take this calculation. So I'm going to comment this line here. And instead of returning area, which is the field that was here, I'm going to return the actual calculation here. Length times width. All right, so let's try this again. Here we go. So now it updates this correctly. All right, because every time you call the get area, it goes and retrieves the length, multiplies that by the width, and then return. So every time you call the get area, you make sure that actually you are getting the latest value in the length and width, the most updated value in length and width. And this way you make sure that area never gets stale. All right, so that is one way to solve this problem. Now, a couple of things here in terms of the programming. So you could do something like this. I could define a local variable local to the get area method by calling it double area, which is equal to length times width, and then I return area. All right, that is something you could do if it makes sense. However, that's redundant. You don't need to do this unless you're going to use the area in something else. All right, so that's one way. Now the next part that I would like to cover here is that what if we wanted to keep the area field? All right, so what if we wanted to keep the area field? In this case, you could do something very similar. So I could remove that calculation from here. Let's uncomment this. So I have the area. And then what I would do next is that I go here, all right, and update the area is equal to the length times width, all right, and then return area, all right. So that is one way to do it. Another way you could do that is you could make sure that every time you set the length or the width to a new value, you go and update your area to be the length times the width, right? So every time you set the length and width to something new, you go and make sure that immediately you go reflect that update on area. So if I compile, run, that will also work. All right, so let's try here, set this to 5, compile, it works. All right, so this is one way to do it. The other way is to calculate the area and then return the area. All right, which is redundant if you do it in the same place. This could be another solution to do it. All right, so this is the answer of how to keep an area field. However, since the area depends on length and width, we still want to make sure that it doesn't get stale. It doesn't become stale. So in this case, you need to update it and make sure that it's always reflecting the latest values of length and width.